So it's about those opposing forces, and it's about understanding that the weight of your seriousness has to be equally balanced with that lightness, that warmth, that wit, that passion. And that's what's missing, I think, a lot of the time.
My name's Mike Lander, and you're listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast, where we bring you actionable insights about sales RFPs, negotiations, and difficult procurement discussions from sales leaders, brand leaders, and procurement leaders. Please subscribe to get updates when new episodes are released. Catherine, thanks ever so much for joining me on Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast.
Brilliant. It's fab to be here. Thank you for having me, Mike.
Pleasure. Now, we've not known each other that long, have we?
Not that long. It must be 5 months or so.
Exactly. I've had some guests that go back 15, 20 years, and some that I've only just met. So, about 5 months or so. And we've had a few glasses of wine together, which is always a good thing.
We certainly have. Always good fun. Always insightful.
Exactly.
I do like a glass of wine. That is fair to say.
I'll join you with that, that's for sure. So, Catherine, for people like sat there thinking, who are these two people having a chat? Who are you? What do you do? And something unusual about yourself.
Okay, so hello, I'm Catherine Allison. I am the founder of a training consultancy called Master the Art. And what I do is I help people communicate with more confidence and really ignite their influence. So essentially, it's pitching, presentation, and communication skills for marketing agencies from any discipline, and creative-minded businesses. So I really help people find their voice and build their gravitas, which I know is something we're going to talk about a lot today. My background, just very quickly, is in creative agencies. So I spent well over 20 years working within agencies. Started off in client services roles, moved into business development. My last in-house or in-agency, I suppose, role was as head of marketing. But I'm also a professional actor. So what I do is draw from my experiences in the agency world, draw from my experiences in the acting world, and I give people tips and techniques to boost their confidence when they're communicating in the workplace.
Brilliant. And something unusual about yourself?
Oh, yes. I was trying to forget about that question. Well, I'm wondering whether to actually go down this avenue, but I'm going to go there. I'm going to be bold.
Let's go there.
Something unusual about myself is that, as I said, I'm an actor. And I spent quite a few years freelancing at various different agencies whilst I was trying to make it as an actor. It's a tough old industry, as you know.
Indeed.
But I was freelancing, really tough. I was freelancing at a particular agency, and one of my friends was working for an ad agency who happened to be working on the Herbal Essences account. Now, I don't know if you remember the Herbal Essences ads. They were very famous for someone enjoying washing their hair in the shower and having an orgasm, let's say.
Yes. Yeah.
You remember the ones.
Absolutely.
I suppose for some people, you have to be of a certain age to remember this. So for those of you in your early 20s, it might not be something you're familiar with. But these ads became quite famous. And my friend was working, was at the creative concept stage of pitching this idea to Herbal Essences. And it was the one where they had 3 beautiful models in a rainforest showering and under a waterfall.
I remember. I do remember. Yeah.
Anyway, the long and short of it is that my friend said, Catherine, we need someone who is an actor just to come in and help us with this concept. We just need someone to do the orgasm bit. Would you be willing to do that? It's just so we can sell it into the client. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So we did a read. Anyway, they got the concept through. Roll on a few more months, and it turns out the beautiful models, weren't quite up to scratch with their orgasms. So I got rolled in again for the actual ad, and it was, I think, still to this date, the most entertaining voiceover job I have ever done. And some of the notes were, that was lovely, Catherine. If you could just this time just come to more of a climax, that would be good. So I'm actually blushing talking about it, Mike. There we are. So when you see that ad It popped up again recently as well.
Brilliant.
It was something like the 10 or 15-year anniversary of Herbal Essences being out there in market.
Brilliant.
And suddenly I was in the cinema and there I am going, oh, there's my voice. Great. Orgasming in front of lots of people. So yes, a slightly embarrassing thing that I'm sharing with you. There we are. What a way to start a podcast.
I was going to say, how do you practice for the role? But I don't think I will. I don't think we should go there.
I definitely don't think we should. Let's just let that one go.
Let's just move on to the business questions. To Gravitas. Exactly. What a good idea. Oh dear. So, what we said we talk about today is, so thanks for coming on, Catherine, and also having a laugh as well. It's always a much better, more fun way of having a podcast. There were 3 questions. So we said, we're going to talk about basically what is Gravitas, why is it important, and how do you get it? So do you want to just kind of start off with, what is Gravitas?
It's a very good question, isn't it? What is Gravitas? So for me, Gravitas is the thing, that it factor, that difference that makes all the difference when it comes to communication. So that's, when I talk about communication, I mean whether it's to one person in a meeting room, to several people in a more expansive boardroom, or whether it's to hundreds, thousands on a stage. But Gravitas is the thing that makes all the difference, because ultimately it's Gravitas that allows you to know and trust your mind, and to be able to speak it so powerfully that people notice your ideas, they sit up and listen when you speak, and they act on what you say. Which sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
That sounds amazing. Yeah.
It sounds like something we all want to have.
Exactly.
So it's a way of being able to express your ideas with real clarity and with real authority. But this word Gravitas is a word that is bandied about a lot.
Yes.
Without, I think, people having a real understanding of what it is exactly.
Definitely.
And I don't know about you, but I certainly was told when I was just starting out in agency life, Catherine, you need to have more gravitas. And I think, okay, great. Well, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
So,
do I read a book? Or do I practice something? Or what do you do?
Do I have to be really professional, important, serious? And actually, if you go to the dictionaries and look at the definitions of gravitas, so the Oxford Dictionary definition is, now let me get this right, it is dignity and solemnity of manner.
Wow.
Which, well, sort of wow. It sounds quite dull, doesn't it? I think.
Extremely. Really?
Extremely
I was
dull.
thinking it would be something really interesting, but no, that's...
No, really dull. And we're going to come on to this. We'll come on to it.
Exactly.
It doesn't feel like it's for you or me, certainly.
No, definitely not.
In my mind, that definition conjures up images of grey-haired men in grey suits pontificating from some kind of platform.
Correct.
With huge dollops of self-importance droning on and on and on, and I am so much more important than you.
Exactly.
Droning on, exactly. We've all been there and listened to people
We've
like
all been there. It's dull as dishwater. Exactly.
Dull. So the Oxford Dictionary definition, I'm like, well, that sounds really boring.
Yeah.
The Cambridge Dictionary defines it as, I think it's dignity, seriousness, and importance of manner, causing feelings of respect and trust in others.
Now, the trust
those
I buy
words are
into.
interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Because, of course, as salespeople, people need to trust us to buy from us.
Exactly.
And we want our colleagues, we want our peers, our board, our clients. We need them to respect us and trust us, because then they're going to want to work with us.
Yeah.
So that's a slightly better definition.
It is. Yeah, I'd agree.
Dignity, seriousness, importance of manner, it still sounds really spectacularly dull.
It does,
so
yes.
I think, if you will indulge me, I think at this point it's helpful to have a bit of a history lesson.
Yes,
and to go back to where this word gravitas actually comes from, because I think that helps explain why there may be some misconceptions about the word and this idea, and what it really is.
Brilliant.
So actually, gravitas is
always up for a
word.
history lesson. Always up for a history lesson.
Excellent.
Definitely.
How's your Latin?
Didn't do it at school. My school's the school of hard knocks. That's for sure. My school's about escaping.
Honest, I mean, I did do a bit of Latin, and I didn't do very well in it. So let's just leave that. But
exactly.
Gravitas is, of course, a Roman word.
Right.
and it's, as we know, it's been translated in various different ways. So weightiness, influence, presence, seriousness, importance of manner, all the things that we've talked about already. But in actual fact, gravitas in ancient Rome was one of the virtues of being a good Roman citizen.
Really?
But what's important is that it wasn't just about this seriousness and importance of manner. It was actually also about kindness, about hard work, about self-worth, and perhaps most importantly, and most interestingly, I think, a sense of humour. So taking yourself lightly. And you've already said at the beginning of our chat today, it's like, oh, it's much better when we're having a conversation, when it's fun, when it's light, all of those things.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we think about the fact that actually there has to be this balance with seriousness and weightiness and lightness, warmth and wit and humour, I suppose. And that's the thing that mattered in the Roman world, in ancient world.
I never knew that.
Rome. Can't speak. Okay. It's actually really fascinating, isn't it? There you go. So for thousands of years, there was this whole, I suppose, rhetorical tradition of training people to be able to speak powerfully. So training the voice and body. And this went on for centuries and centuries and centuries. It was handed down from Aristotle and Cicero and then through on via Francis Bacon, not the painter. He was an English philosopher in the early 17th century. Yeah. Again, not something that I knew until I was delving a bit deeper into gravitas. And it continued to evolve. And then Isaac Newton pops up. And Isaac Newton, in 1687...
This is a proper history lesson. This is brilliant.
It is, don't worry, it's going to be over soon. It's going to be over soon, I promise. In 1687, he published his book, and actually I'm going to have to look at my notes right now because I'm not an expert in Newton.
You're not a historian.
He published his book, The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, which of course was where he coined the term gravity. And gravity is that universal force.
Oh.
And somewhere from that moment is when actually people started to think about gravitas as only being, because he named it gravity after the word gravitas, as only being this weightiness and seriousness.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, if you dig a bit deeper, Newton actually talks about gravity having opposing forces. And actually, it's as much up as it is down. And the reason I've gone into that history lesson is because actually gravitas is the grounding force that gives you influence, it gives you authority, but it also has to have that opposing force upwards that gives you that warmth, wit, lightness.
I've never heard it described like this in my entire life. This is brilliant.
Great. So, I've got a bit overexcited about that.
Very good.
But if you're too down, you become deathly dull, dry, boring. But on the flip side, if you're too up, you become insubstantial, you become life is air, and people won't listen when you speak. So it's about those opposing forces, and it's about understanding that the weight of your seriousness has to be equally balanced with that lightness, that warmth, that wit, that passion. And that's what's missing, I think, a lot of the time. And interestingly, I saw someone, and I wish I could remember who it was, and I was on the move at the time, but I saw someone post on LinkedIn recently, and it was things I've learned over my 25 years being a leader, something like that. And she wrote, gravitas is bullshit.
Right.
Fact. And I sat there and I thought, wow, okay. I do a lot of work on gravitas, and she's just coming out and saying it's bullshit. But then she wrote, authenticity is key. And actually, authenticity is a part of gravitas.
Right.
You've got to trust that who you are is enough. So in a way, I disagreed with her, but I agreed with her all at the same time. So that's the thing that makes all the difference, I think. And it's really important to say at this point that gravitas isn't just for the stuffy old men in grey suits or people that have been working for decades and have bucket loads of experience behind them. Gravitas is for everybody. It can be learnt. I think there's
so that's a really important point. It can be learned.
It's so important. It absolutely can be learned. It's a trait. It's software. It's not hardware. And it reminds me of a Dale Carnegie quote, which is, there are no born speakers, they're trained. So you can train yourself to find and build your gravitas.
Yep.
And to get that balance right between take me seriously and natural warmth. And that's really what you're aiming for. How does that sound? Does that sound...
No, that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking back now is, so I was ex-KPMG. I was a business consultant. And if you looked at partners, one of the distinguishing factor of most partners, not all, but most, was that they had this thing called gravitas. And we always, as consultants, were saying, we know it when we see it, but it's really hard to define it. And what you just did was basically define it. And I've got one guy in particular in my mind. I won't name his name. It's not a bad story at all. It's a really good story. But he had the ability to remain grounded and yet also have an air about him which was very welcoming, very warm, very engaging. But he had, he wanted to make you listen to him. There was something about the pace in his voice and the tone of his voice and the thoughtfulness of the pace and the things he said, obviously. But actually, it was quite a lot about the way and the tone and the manner in which it was said. And it made you want to listen.
So there are certain traits. There are certain physical traits. There are certain vocal traits. There are certain behaviors that actually come together to give someone both presence and gravitas. And it's also important, I think, to highlight that gravitas is subtle.
Yes.
So it's not do as I say authority, which I think is what sometimes people think they have to do, sort of be the big I am, shouting and oh, do what I say. It's much subtler than that. It's and it's unique to each person as well.
Do you have any examples in the acting world of, I mean, do all actors naturally have gravitas, or is it different?
No, I would say, and actually I'd be wary of using actors because the key thing with gravitas, as an example, sorry, I wasn't finishing my sentence there. The thing with gravitas, it's about being yourself.
Right.
So it's about trusting that who you are is enough. And actually, I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. Whereas as an actor, you're performing.
You're performing.
You're stepping into the shoes of someone else and you're playing a role. And actually, that is not what gravitas is about. And that was a lesson that I learned, actually, when I was first pitching as a lowly account manager. And I think we were pitching on Abbey National, shows how long ago it was. And I wrote out this long script. And I thought, it's fine. I'm an actor. I can make it sound natural. But it didn't sound natural at all. I sounded like I was reading a script and I didn't let who I am shine through. I didn't let my personality come through. It sounded so scripted and rehearsed. We didn't win the pitch. And so that's why that was quite a big lesson.
I never ever script these podcasts, ever. And people say to me, oh, so how does it work? And do you want it to write out a script? And lots of deep questions. I'm like, no, what you need to do is we need to think about 3 biggish questions and then we'll delve into them in a conversation. And the art, hopefully, of me as a host is to encourage you to speak about those 3 topics in a meaningful and deep way that triggers thoughts in me that develops a conversation. Because having a script is a disaster.
It's always a disaster, but you do have to get your thinking clear.
Correct.
So that doesn't mean that you just rock up and muddle through something.
Exactly.
You still have to have thought about, okay, what would my answers be to these questions? Have I got my thinking absolutely crystal clear in terms of those responses? And you might have written down 1 or 2 key words that you can talk around, but as soon as you've got a script, it sounds automated, regurgitated, mechanical, all of those things.
So did you see, I can't remember, Catherine, were you at the agency conference that me and David Meikle spoke at?
I wasn't at that, but I have heard about it. And I have heard that you did a great job on that platform.
Thank you. But I was reflecting on, I actually kind of wrote out kind of scripts for each of the slides. And I knew, because I've presented an awful lot in the past, obviously, I knew what would happen was the script would be irrelevant. And in fact, the script was so irrelevant, when we got there on the day, we couldn't read the auto cue. There was an auto cue kind of thing, and that just wasn't going to work because it was too small. But it didn't matter because we'd prepared really well. And we've got enough experience in our industry and our disciplines that wherever the questions were going to come from in the audience, we'd normally have something to say about a particular topic because we're well prepared. The prepared mind, I think, is an enormous... Is it a part of Gravitas? I think so. I think it is.
Absolutely, it is. And I'll explain a bit of background to that as well. I want to just build on what you said about you had a conversation and you were able to sound conversational but expert because you'd done the prep work, you'd got your thinking clear beforehand. And if we think about this in a sales context, we always should be aiming for conversation, for dialogue, not monologue. And yet, when we're looking to impress people, when we think we've got to win some business, we go fully into broadcast mode and dialogues. I think it's helpful if at this point we talk about how you can actually find and build your own gravitas.
Definitely.
How you can find your own voice. And that will also...
So a quick recap. So we've worked out what it is, some of the characteristics of it. Just touch on, before you do that, why is it so important?
So important. Well, gravitas is the thing that allows you to have the confidence to be entirely yourself, and also the power to command the respect and trust of others.
Right.
So it's important because it allows you to communicate with people in a way that is powerful, that is influential, that has authority, but that also still has that likability, that approachability, that warmth. And if you think about a good leader, gravitas is essential. You need to have all of those things. So you need to have that balance right and be able to flex between serious and authority, and then flex into warmth, approachability as the situation requires. So
Brilliant.
From a sales perspective, and I will just share another stat, I've got them all here,
Very good.
which is that 67% of pitches are lost over softer factors over and above harder factors.
Wow.
And yet we agonize over solving the problem. We agonize over the content of a pitch and give very little thought to how we're going to communicate that content, how we're going to communicate that solution in a way that is really going to land and engage the people that we're pitching to. And so when you start to see that 67% of pitches are lost over those softer factors, which of course, that's what gravitas is, you start to see how it can affect the bottom line. So that's why it matters. That's why it's important.
Where's that research from?
So that is from some research that was done actually back in 2019, 2020. It was Up to the Light What Clients Think report that is run by a gentleman called Jonathan Kirk, who is a member of, or he's on the experts register at the Design Business Association.
Interesting.
Yes.
So people should probably have a look at that. So how do you get it? So now we know what it is and why it's important. How do you get it?
Well, again, good question, because it feels like there's all these notions all over the place, and we've sort of touched on, you've got to be able to communicate with authority and confidence. You've got to do this and tone, and you're pausing. You've got to get everything just right. How do you take it all?
Exactly.
And how do you actually find a way forward? Well, the best way forward that I have found has been created by a lady called Caroline Goyder, who has written a brilliant book. Yep. Yes, exactly. She has written a brilliant, I remember you telling me that, brilliant book called Gravitas, which I would recommend to everyone. And she believes that something called the Gravitas equation can almost act as your own personal mentor, guiding you to your gravitas within. I wish I'd come up with this myself. I think it's bloody brilliant. I didn't. It was Caroline Goyder. But I'll explain what the gravitas equation is. It is knowledge plus purpose plus passion less anxiety equals gravitas.
Okay.
So knowledge, purpose, and passion, they're the three pillars upon which gravitas rests. And the more you strengthen them, the more you strengthen and boost your gravitas. And then the only thing that gets in the way are
Yeah.
all of those anxieties that rise up in us when we're in moments of stress, when we feel under pressure, when we're suddenly out of our comfort zone. And actually, those anxieties are quite easy to deal with once you know how.
Yeah.
But let's go back to knowledge, purpose, passion. So knowledge is the first pillar of the Gravitas equation.
Yeah.
And you've got to have something to say.
Exactly.
You've got to have a zone of expertise, a circle of confidence, I suppose, in which you're expert and in which you're authoritative. But what's important here, it's not just about mind knowledge. It's not just about what you know. It's as much about your understanding of the behaviors of Gravitas, your body knowledge, as it is your mind knowledge, and the two need to work together. So yes, it's about what you know, but it's also about speaking clearly and concisely, speaking without fillers, pausing to allow your points to land, having warm, positive, open body language, listening fully, which is a key behavior of Gravitas. It's about your knowledge of all of that as well as your mind knowledge.
Yep.
So mind knowledge and body knowledge, the two need to work together. So that's the first pillar.
Got that.
Then we have purpose. And purpose, and actually for me, this is I would almost say it's the most valuable pillar, because purpose is about your values. It's about why you do what you do. And the key thing here is that Gravitas shines most when you're serving a purpose that is bigger than you. So Gravitas isn't self-serving. As salespeople, we often switch into that sort of about me. I'm going to impress. I'm going to be really flashy with this presentation. It's fine. I've got this. And no, you've got to take the focus off yourself, place it firmly on the people that you're presenting to or talking to. What is it that they need? How can you help them? Yep. Yes, it needs to matter to you, but it has to matter to others as well. So Gravitas isn't self-serving.
Okay. Yep.
And that's the purpose pillar. And then we have passion. And this is that spark that sets your ideas alight. It fuels you, inspires others. It's that the passion, the excitement, the thing that gets people really listening and engaging with you. So knowledge, purpose, passion.
Yep.
Where each of those pillars meet, that sweet spot is where you find your Gravitas.
Yep.
But the way forward is different for everyone. So what can happen is if you come from a very analytical background, you might have studied maths, engineering, sciences. What can happen is you might be really strong on the mind knowledge part of the Gravitas equation, but lack the passion and the body knowledge to communicate everything that you know in a way that engages, that actually inspires and influences your audience.
Yep.
On the flip side, what can happen is if you come from a really creative background, you might walk into a room with bags of energy, bags of enthusiasm and passion. You've got a whirlwind of ideas. You're almost a distraction of ideas, but you lack the ability to communicate what you know and to communicate those ideas in a way that are logical, that are structured, that makes sense, that allow your audience to really take them on board. So the way forward is different for everyone. And the key with this is understanding what's missing for you as an individual, and then taking steps to improve, to hone the things you need most.
So anxiety. Talk about how you manage anxiety. Otherwise, it gets in the way of all of that great work.
Absolutely gets in the way of all that great work. And it happens to all of us. And I think anyone that can sit there and say, oh, I never get nervous, or I never worry about anything, oh, it's fine, I just rock up and wing it. Really?
No.
So we have all sorts of, well, what do you think? Do you have voices popping up in your head, or a feeling in your head going, you don't know what you're talking about? Everyone thinks you're an idiot. Why did you just say that? Some people do actually go, no, that doesn't happen to me at all. It might be more of a feeling.
That happens to me. I can be in front of an audience. I'm on a panel in a few weeks' time. So I like doing panels. I do quite a few of them. Every time I do them, every single time, I sit there looking at 20 people or 200 people. And in my head, some voice goes, you don't know what you're talking about. Someone's going to ask you a question that will completely reveal the fact that you've got no idea at all what you're talking about. And that always happens. And yet,
and it can
it
derail
never
you
does.
completely.
It derails you. So I have techniques for doing, for reducing the anxiety in my head. Really simple things. But so I'd be fascinated to hear how would you teach people? What do you say to people to reduce the anxiety?
Well, first of all, it's about acknowledging that actually we have those voices in our head that can derail us completely and send us down into a horrible place of self-doubt.
Yeah.
And we actually have our inner critic and we have our inner coach. Now, our inner critic, if we let it, is that negative voice that does a full-on character assassination, that tells us in our head that we're idiots and that we have no authority, no gravitas.
Exactly.
Our inner coach is the one that, if we allow it to, does calm, stillness, poise, celebration, positive advice. But often we're so tuned into that negative voice, that inner critic, that's doing that full-on character assassination, that we don't hear the inner coach at all. But the first step towards boosting your inner confidence so you can have that outer confidence and that poise under pressure that is a key part of Gravitas is getting that inner critic in check.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that that inner critic is actually about refinement and it's about improvement. And you can use that to help you honestly step up and improve for the next time. So it's kind critiquing, I suppose.
Yeah.
And people have talk about those voices in different ways or those feelings in different ways. But if you have that voice going, oh my God, you totally messed that pitch up, then actually talk back to it with the kind voice of the coach and go, okay, well, that didn't go as well as I hoped.
Right.
And then get that inner critic to do the improvement bit. It's like, what can I do differently next time to make sure that doesn't happen again? So you're using that negative voice in a positive way.
How do you access the inner coach? That's a really interesting, I like frameworks. So how do you find and train that inner coach inside yourself?
Well, there are a couple of techniques that I think are helpful, a good way of doing that.
I like a good technique. I do like a good technique.
Well, this one isn't my own again. I'm actually sharing something that, I can't remember her name, but which is really frustrating. But she runs a company called Fuck Being Humble. Also would highly recommend. I mean, highly recommending my competitors here.
That's fine.
But she talks about wins before dins. And so every day, at the end of the day, you get out a piece of paper, you get your pen, and you think, right, I'm going to write down the wins of today.
Right.
It doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be, I won a 500 gram piece of business. It's not that. We're talking about, I got my voice heard in the board meeting today, and that was a big tick. So you're writing down, and you have to write it down. You can't just think it in your head. It doesn't have the same effect. It's writing down, right, okay, this went well today. And if you continue doing that, it's sort of positive affirmation, I suppose. It just helps you tune into that positive voice. And then the second thing that I think would be helpful to share is about turning worry into strategy. I can't say that word, strategy. I always sound like I've had far too many gins when I say strategy.
Which you haven't at this time of the day. Exactly.
No, definitely not. That would not be good. So, all those what ifs that rattle around in our head. Oh, what if I forget what I'm saying? What if everyone thinks I'm an idiot? You actually get a piece of paper. On one side, you write down your worries, your what ifs. On the right-hand side, you write down a strategy to address that worry, that what if. And the act of writing it down, again, means that when you walk into that meeting, that presentation room or press join meeting, that you've got a strategy in place to deal with whatever might happen, those what ifs that might suddenly pop up in your head. Yeah. So those would be the two ways I would say of really trying to tune in and train yourself to hear that inner coach.
Brilliant. So I'll add a couple more things that I've learned myself. And I practiced this with my son many years ago, and it seemed to work. So we have something called the bin of fire.
This sounds good.
So it's the bin of fire and the kind of bin for now. And the bin for later. So you got like 3 bins basically. So when negative thoughts arrive, or things that, as young children, they worry about, or that they might not be able to sleep with. I remember there was a couple of things that turned up talking to our son, and I said, put that in the bin of fire. And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, pick it up in your head and stick it in the bin of fire. And then it set fire to it, it's gone. He was like, oh. I said, try it. He tried it and it worked. And what I do is if I get those horrible, annoying, negative thought in my head, I just pick it up and I stick it in the bin of fire and it's gone.
Brilliant. I love that because there's a visual aspect to it as well. And I think that can really help. Can I steal that for some of my training sessions?
Anytime you like. Anytime you like. Definitely.
I will reference you with thanks too, Mike Langer.
Exactly. But yeah, so that works for me. And also just the breathing, which as actors, you're obviously very well versed in.
Absolutely. And actually everything comes down to the breath. Everything comes down to breathing. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, Mike, though. You were mid-sentence.
No, not at all. No, it's just, and I say to people when they're negotiating, to reduce anxiety, because anxiety is a big problem when you're negotiating, because it will knock you off guard, basically, and you will come off worse, is just to literally just take 3 long, deep breaths calmly and then carry on. And it's amazing.
It absolutely is amazing. It is the quickest way to get back to a calm, centered place.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that fairly well proven?
It is definitely proven. I say that and not being able to quote any research at all, but it's lowering your cortisol levels. So the stress hormone and that feeling that rises up in you. And just by breathing, you're lowering that cortisol level and it makes you feel much calmer.
Uh-huh.
And it also allows you to listen, which again is a key behavior of Gravitas. It's only by listening, really listening fully, that you get to hear those juicy insights, those real nuggets, actually, that you can then use further down the line. And I know that listening, of course, is a key negotiation skill, isn't
Correct. It should be like 2/3 of what you're doing is listening rather than talking. Precisely.
Yeah.
Catherine, this has been amazing. Been really, really, really fascinating. What would you leave people with who are listening, who are saying, okay, I've got the framework, I think, and I understood why it's important. Human beings find it very difficult to process 10 things that they've got to do. What's the one thing that you'd say? How would you start on a journey to improving Gravitas?
Okay, the first thing is remembering the Gravitas equation. As I said, I think it's bloody brilliant. So understand what you're missing from that Gravitas equation. If it's simply about minimizing those anxieties that are stopping you from expressing yourself fully, then work on that. If you know that you need to tap more into the passion pillar of the Gravitas equation so you can get that warmth, that compassion, that engagement, then focus on that and then take the steps to improve that element. And of course, we could sit here for hours talking about the steps to boost your passion, steps to boost your knowledge. We've scratched the surface, of course. But really understanding, being self-aware, understanding where you need to improve, which pillar you need to strengthen is number one, the first step. And then really it's about going away and thinking about your voice and your body. And making sure that when you speak, your inner world and your outer world match. Part of that is about minimizing anxieties, but a lot of it is trusting that who you are is enough.
Right.
Because actually, if you can find your gravitas and if you can express it in a way that resonates with others, then your success comes from who you are. And that is so important to take away. Be yourself. So I digress a bit. Number one, the gravitas equation.
Yep.
Know what you've got to strengthen. Number two, think about your voice and body, but work on your inner confidence so you can have that outer confidence and make sure the two match. And I would say number three is have fun with it all.
Yep.
Enjoy it. Try things out in a safe space, in a low stress situation, and notice what happens. So it may simply be, and what we haven't done today, what we haven't had time to do is really dig a bit deeper into what it is about your voice, what it is, what you do with your body to boost your gravitas. If we had another hour or so, then we could do that.
But maybe, Catherine, it would be great to have you back to talk about specifically voice. Because a lot of people a lot of agency leaders that are presenting, a lot of salespeople that are talking to clients. I've never had any voice training. I had one session with Caroline many years ago, which is brilliant. But it's so rare that we work on our voice. So it'd be great to have you back just to talk about aspects of how to work on voice.
Brilliant. And I think it's important that it's realistic as well. So what I wouldn't do is go into a whole, this is what we do as actors. Because the reality is that as agency leaders, new business people, salespeople, we're not going to be doing huge, big vocal warm-ups before we go into a pitch.
Correct. We're not.
So I think, as you referenced, breathing techniques and realistic things that you can do within the world that you're working in. I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Okay, I will invite you back. We'll definitely do that. Catherine, when people want to find out more about how to develop their gravitas, then where do they find you?
So they find me on the internet. So if you go to mastertheart.co.uk, that's my website. And there's details on there of all of my services, everything that I offer. My email is on there too, so drop me a line. And also on LinkedIn, Catherine Allison, Allison. Always happy to connect with people, and I'm always happy to have a chat. So even if it's someone just going, I've got a big pitch tomorrow, help, very happy to help. And I'd love to hear from anyone and everyone. There we go.
Catherine, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks ever so much.
Mike, thank you. It's been brilliant to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast series with your host, Mike Lander. Please subscribe so that you'll catch all the next episodes.